Anyway, my friend, you brought up a whole other can of worms with UAPs. I didn't even think to bring that up to you, man. And I would love to talk to you about that. I think that maybe that can be a jumping off point next time, unless you have some quick thoughts on that you want to let fly.
Oh, just to justify why I listed it, I think the vast majority of what is reported and talked about in the UFO community is just a huge pile of steamy shit. It's just bullshit. It's
Yeah.
just made up stuff to sell, to appear on television. It follows no rationality, no empirical rigor, nothing. It's just nonsense. The vast majority. And all I have for it is disdain. So let me put it that way. So much disdain that I feel discouraged to even search the literature these days,
Mm.
because it takes so much effort to find something. And before you find it, you have to smell the shit so much that it discourages me from doing that. But there is stuff out there that you just cannot shove under the carpet. And that stuff shows us that certain organizing principles in nature that we think of as very fundamental, such as the principle of inertia, uh, are not. Because something out there, I don't think it's aliens from another planet, by the way.
Mm.
I think it's from here, it's off here, and
Mm.
has always been here. There is something out there that doesn't obey it, that throws the law of inertia out the window, throws the notion of conservation of momentum out the window. And that's troubling. That's
Yeah.
troubling.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, are you familiar with Jung's riff on UFOs?
Yeah, but his notion of UFOs as a projection,
Yeah.
a mental
Mental
projection that
projection.
actually acquires physical form, I think it can account for a lot, but I don't think it can account for the modern parts of the UAP phenomenon that are associated with the military.
Right. Yeah, and I used to be a lot more warm to that idea, but then there are seemingly at least thought-provoking accounts of actual objects being captured or witnessed or physically, interacting with people. And again, how do you separate the shit from Shinola? How do you separate the reports from reality? And I don't know how you do that. I don't know how
Well,
you.
the Jung could account for the physical part of the phenomenon as well, the objectively measurable part with radars and all that, because although this is subtle, for Jung, the physical world is itself a manifestation of the collective unconscious. So
Yes.
it is itself mental. It just presents itself to us physically on the dashboard. But it, as it is in itself, the so-called physical world, the colloquially physical world, is mental in essence and operates according to the same archetypes as the human mind. So therefore, an archetypal evocation in the human mind can coherently correspond to an archetypal manifestation in the world at large, physically. So he could account even for the physical manifestation of the phenomenon. The reason why I said I don't think it accounts for the military aspect of it is more subtle and also less strong and less definite. The reason is that people in the military, they I think they are less susceptible to psychological projection
Hmm.
when they are in the job, because they are trained um, to perform the job in a certain way that doesn't leave much room open for um, visionary manifestations, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And they are focused on instrumentation, they are focused on the mission plan, they are focused on the procedures, and there are many of them usually involved, all of them equally focused on the very ground level concrete aspects of the mission they have to carry out. This is not fertile ground for mass level projections that could acquire physical form. um, that's why I made this exception. It's not a clear cut reason to say Jung's theory cannot account for it. It's not that clear cut. In principle, it could, But I don't think in practice it is plausible that this whole thing is just an archetypal projection of human beings that resonates with the physical world and gains physical embodiment. It looks like there is an independent agency behind it.
Yeah.
Um, and if that is so, and if that agency can disregard organizing principles in nature that we consider fundamental, such as conservation of
Yeah.
momentum and the law of inertia, because these are the two most clearest ones. They also disregard Aristotelian logic, by the way, but we need another conversation to
Yeah.
talk
Yeah.
about that part. The fact that there seems to be an agency that can disregard these things,
Yeah.
that's a challenge to the naturalist mindset, which is my mindset. It's uncomfortable to me. It's not as uncomfortable as the fine tuning, but the fine tuning I thought of, I satisfied myself that there are ways to deal with it.
Yeah.
Human self reflection, I'm not completely satisfied yet. And the UAP phenomenon, I'm totally not satisfied.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
still discombobulated about that.
Yeah, and seemingly it violates thermodynamics as well, because the account is always that there's not a heat signature, there's no obvious, source of energy that's allowing it to propel itself across space. It's just moving in extraordinarily stochastic ways, confusing ways that don't seem like they should be possible. But I have to ask you, you say once you get beyond the pile of steaming bullshit, there is something there. What is the something there that has intrigued you the most?
I am intrigued by what Jacques Vallée says.
Mhm.
I am intrigued by what's his name, the scientist from Stanford that has
Oh, Avi Loeb?
no, 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 the microbiologist from Stanford,
Oh, hmm.
Dolan, I think. No, Nolan Dolan,
I don't think I'm
a
familiar.
blonde guy
Is he one
from
of the guys who's looked at supposed, exotic materials?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I forgot his name. He intrigues me because he comes across to me as viscerally honest. He even, the signs of honesty are subtle and can be and usually misinterpreted. I'll tell you a name which probably will be the last name that you would imagine I would put forward as somebody who is honest and telling the truth. Um, Whitley Strieber,
Okay.
I think, is telling the truth. Um,
I thought you
the
were gonna say Bob
sign,
Lazar.
no, no, I did
Not a
not say
fan.
that. No, I
That's
did
what
not
I
say
okay,
that.
okay.
Uh, Honesty, when it expresses itself unreservedly, it bears itself naked to risk and ridicule.
Hmm.
This is one of the characteristics of honesty. When you don't adapt and tune and embellish your story so it fits more with the mainstream cultural narrative to avoid ridicule. When you don't do that, when you just say it as it is, and you run the risk of being ridiculed, that tends to be a sign of honesty. And also consistency over time and the subtlety of certain observations that people don't really come up with arbitrarily. And Strieber had some very, very subtle things he says that you smell like, oh, okay, he has seen something here.
Hmm.
This is not made up stuff.
I don't know if I
This
know
is
there's
not what the idiots normally come up with.
I don't know if I know his story. What's his story?
You can read Communion,
Oh,
his
him. Okay, okay.
1988 book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, similarly, I think this Stanford scientist is being honest not only because he talks scientific language in a rigorous way. It's very easy for idiots to take scientific terminology and make a mess of it. They
Sure.
very quickly show their hand,
I
and
do it all
they
the
show that
time.
not you, but they show that they do not really understand what they are talking about. They know the words, but they don't know what they actually mean. And this guy from Stanford, he's a true scientist. He's consistent and coherent in what he's saying, and he openly talks about his own abduction experiences,
Oh, really?
which is somebody who is trying to ride. his academic reliability does not do.
That's
You
true.
only do that when your agenda is, I'll just be honest. Even if I'm wrong, I'll just be honest. So I smell that in him. And Valet has always impressed me as a good thinker. He has been the target of recent criticism for seemingly taking people too much at face value, trusting people too much. I think there may be something to this criticism recently, but he has a body of work that spans 50 years, more now, 54 years.
Yeah.
I think his first book is from the late 60s, 55 years even. And I think the majority of that body of work is intriguing. For instance, he doesn't fall for the little naive fairy tale that, oh, it's just organic aliens from another star system that came here in metal spaceships to do a survey. Bullshit. The evidence is not consistent with this. The evidence is much more discombobulating than this. This is a sort of very pedestrian little hypothesis that doesn't account for the depth of the mystery we have in our hands. So he doesn't fall for that, and I admire that. So I just mentioned three names
Yeah.
that range from one you would expect me to say, like the Stanford scientist
Yeah.
and Jacques Vallée, and one you would not expect me to say, like Whitley Strieber. Now, notice, even the sincere people can make a mess of their experience later on, because human beings, in order to incorporate their life experiences, even the difficult and traumatic ones, they need to come up with stories. That's part of psychological integration. And human beings are prone to making a mess of what was the original data, by weaving narratives about it later on in order to try to create space for it in their worldview, and account for it in some way that is psychologically integrative. So Whitley is no exception to that. I am not, you are not, nobody is, Whitley is not. And he has been talking about it for almost 40 years now. So I'm sure you will be able to find statements from him that you can ridicule. In the process of trying to psychologically integrate this stuff later on, you will inevitably fall
Yeah.
into lines of speculation that are not productive and that are fantastical. But I do think the origin of it all and his personality as a whole is the personality of somebody who is being sincere, and did not calculate the risk of being ridiculed, and who just went with the sincerity. Some people are like that. There are people like that. I think he's one of them.
Yeah. Very interesting. It hasn't been that long since our first conversation, maybe I don't know, 3 years. But when you think about how much some of these topics have matured in that time, it really is mind-blowing. I mean, the UAP conversation was much more difficult to have with sincerity and nuance. AI was nothing even approaching what's public facing now. So, I mean, who knows where we're going, where things are going to be next. We could talk again in a few months, and it would probably be the high weirdness would be dialed up to levels that we would just no. I don't think that's possible. I don't think any human being will be married to an extraterrestrial with an AI implant by that point. But hey, who knows?